the light is on.
Now we're on.
How's it going, Mark?
There you go.
Now we should be
Green
good.
lights are on.
Who knows that? I didn't know that.
Now we're good, Gina.
When I was here.
Call to meeting the Planning and Zoning Commission for the February 10th, 2020 Planning and Zoning meeting. Gina, roll call.
Tony Gokebach.
Here.
Mark Hydrich.
Here.
Mark Kleesner.
Here.
Mark Pontic.
Here.
Tom Holdmeyer.
Here.
Sandy Lucy.
Here.
John Borgman.
Here?
Chuck Watson.
Here.
Samantha Wacker. Carolyn Witt.
Here.
Sal Maniaci.
Please stand for a pledge of allegiance. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the January 13th, 2020 meeting. If you've had a chance to review those, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Moving on to item number 3, file number 20-0201. The applicant is requesting a rezoning from M2 Heavy Industrial to PDR, sorry about that, Planned Residential, and approval of a development plan for property located at 700 West 2nd Street, International Shoe Factory. Sal?
All right, thank you. So, yes, as you all know, this is a request to rezone the International Shoe Factory from M2 Heavy Industrial to Planned Residential. This is a fairly new zone district. This isn't our first one. If you remember, our first Planned Residential was for a proposed apartment complex on East 5th across from Hillerman's that went through just over a year ago. I think it was last February, actually. And so this is a similar request for multifamily, although there are different factors leading it to needing a planned unit. As you all know, we have unplanned districts. We have a multifamily district, an R3 multifamily district that developers can request to utilize for multifamily. However, there are different stipulations that have to be met, largely for larger lots when you have more open space, and the district is meant for infill and for more unique developments that can't fit into those districts. So, as you are aware, I'm sure, the property is located at the corners of Rand on 2nd Street, in between Rand and Johnson, and then Edith does run to the rear. There are 2 parcels involved here. However, this second half of this block is not involved. There are 3 homes on Rand, just to the rear. Other than that, it is almost 2 city blocks is what the development takes over. As you can see here, it's still zoned M2 Heavy Industrial from when this was the International Shoe Factory. It has been vacant since 1964, from what we can see. There was, I think, 59, 61 is when production stopped, and then it was utilized as warehousing until about 64, 65, is what our Historic Preservation Commission surveys have dug up. As for the development plan, this is what was submitted. I know it's a lot easier for you to see in your packet, but I did want to throw it up here. You can see it is color-coded here from 3 different, not necessarily phases. The applicant can let you know if there are going to be phases of construction, but that is for the stories of the building. So this purple bluish, this is the 3-story portion of the building. This pink is the 2-story, and then there's the single-story that's along Rand Street. And you can see where all the parking is proposed to the rear, as well as in between here in these 2 horseshoes, or this H shape, if you want to call it, there on each side. There is 2 dumpster enclosures, both on the south side of the building, I guess for separate wings. There shows lighting in the parking lot as well as a stormwater basin in the rear. There is this highlighted portion, and this dashed in red. There is an alley. I'll show a photo of it in a little bit. It is recorded as a public alley. It's 12 foot wide. It is not improved. So right now it's just a grassed alley that runs between the back of the property and the neighbor's property there. That is requested to be vacated as part of that. Since it is unimproved and it doesn't actually connect to any residences to separate blocks, staff has no problem with that, and we have no need for the city to maintain that easement. As for the parking calculation, let me pull up site plan real quick. Make sure I get my numbers right. There are 128 on-site parking spaces, actually in the parking lot, or in the two parking lots, and then there are 25 on-street parking spaces, which I'll get to a little bit later. They are located on Rand and Second Street. There is a demolition plan that was submitted with this as well, as you can kind of see, not on here, but on your one that was handed out, you can read the fine print. It does explain the portions that will be demolished. I've highlighted them here, so there are 4 structures in total that will be demolished. There's 2 kind of connecting here. To the south, there's one where the parking will be on the south side of the building, and again, this portion here. Those are all substructures that were used for storage. And some of them actually in our historic preservation survey were considered not putting forth to the historic nature of it, of the building. Again, they weren't part of the original structure. They were added on for storage later. And then I've highlighted again where the alleyway will be vacated to the rear. And then once those structures are gone, everything in purple is the proposed parking area. So just some photos of the existing site here before we get to the renderings. This is looking down Johnson Street. So this is the eastern side of the building, obviously the 3-story wing. So you're looking down this side of the building here. This is on the opposite side, looking down Rand on the single story, the other side of the block. And then here is everything that will be demolished. So you can kind of see the 3 structures. There's Kwanzaa Hut here, the shed in the middle, and then this is directly to the rear, and then all this equipment that you see is actually where the parking area will be, and obviously that would be removed as well. That is on site. So looking here, this is just to the left, looking the opposite side of Rand. So right at the corner where the second story kind of turns into 1 story, this will be the driveway into it. And so looking at an aerial, you can tell where Robert Street used to go through when this was built. They vacated that in the 40s, and so that will be the main drive aisle that cuts through there, so that will be opened back up to get into the parking lot. And then on this picture to the right, this is actually the alleyway, so I know with the snow you can't tell, but it's unimproved. There is an original curb cut here that accesses the alley, and there's a sidewalk, but there is no actual constructed alley that gets you from Rand Street over to Johnson. But that is the general area. So when that is vacated, half of that will go to the developer. The other half will go to the property owner on this side. So they actually will receive some additional land they don't have right now. It's hard to tell without a survey, but it looks like that house is pretty close to the property line, and they'll be able to actually get a little bit more side yard when this is done, if approved. So here's the renderings that were approved, that were submitted. I'll kind of flip through these. You can stop me if you have some questions on them. I'm sure the applicant will be able to explain a little more detail. This is looking north, so the river is on this side, and you can see the parking lot to the rear. This is bird's eye view from the other side. See the access, the new curb cut into this U-shape here, where there will be additional parking along 2nd Street. Again, that's that same parking lot, so this is standing on 2nd Street looking inward. Again, just bird's eye view of those improvements. This is to the rear, so basically the parking lot and all the area that will be demolished, all those buildings will be demolished. Again, just another bird's eye view. And then this is just the final rendering showing at the intersection of, this will be 2nd and Rand, looking at the structure in its entirety. So there were 3 renderings submitted with the application. These don't necessarily really come into our review because at the end of the day, we're just really looking at the development plan and the site, but it does show 3 different units. There is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and a 1-bedroom. What's not on here, which I did find out later, there is also a studio apartment that's going to be offered, which is similar to the 1-bedroom. It's just no walls. It's just an open studio style, more so. It'll be a little bit cheaper. But to give 4 different options of housing units. So kind of going through my analysis here, which obviously you all have in my staff report. Like I said before, well, I don't know if I mentioned here, it's proposed 85 units in all 3 phases of the building, all 3 stories. They are requesting essentially, if you want to call them variances, but the reason that they are before you with a planned district. You know, if they're coming in R3, they wouldn't have to spend any of this. They say we're going to go R3, and it's all reviewed in-house. There are 2 items that have to be addressed as part of this development plan. The first of which is parking. So our city code requires that all apartments provide at least 2 parking spaces per unit when it comes to multifamily. So in this case, with the applicant requesting 128 off-street as well as the 25 on-street, which would be striped along Rand and Second, that gets them to that 153, and that gets them to a ratio of about 1.8. So they're about 20% below what would be permitted if it was an unplanned district. And so the on-street parking is, like I said, is shown being striped. That was a recommendation by us that the developer would actually stripe the on-street parking to maximize that as much as possible. So there's not people who pull in and park and take up too much space, and you start losing a spot here or there every few feet. And so that would hopefully maximize the on-street parking. And both of those street widths along Second and Rand do have, they're at least between 35 and 37 feet, so they can have parking on both sides with striped marked parking. On Johnson Street, there is currently parking on both sides. We're not recommending it become parking on one side, but we didn't recommend any parking be striped on Johnson because of the fact that it is a little bit narrower. It's less than 30 feet. I think it's about 28, 29. I think it varies a little bit in between there. And so just like any other public parking, it could be utilized, but we didn't think that would be a good spot to advertise and actually place public parking stalls painted on the street there. So the applicant's reasoning for that is that 41% of these units will be one bedroom. So over a third of these are going to be one bedroom, and their argument there is that at least 20% of those will be people with one car. And so not 100% of the people who have one bedrooms are going to have 2 cars, which is how their reasoning, their justification is how they get down to that 1.8 parking ratio rather than 2. So I will say that doesn't meet our code if this was unplanned. Obviously, there are the 2 cars per unit. It is worth mentioning that there is a national standard for that. So we did pull up, the American Planning Association does have a parking code that, we've used APA standards for other things. And I did pull what their parking standards would be for this. And ironically, so it's 2 parking spaces for everything 2 beds and up. And then it's 1.5 for everything that is 1 bedroom. So they're saying that, the same thing, that if you're going to have some with 1 bedrooms, not everyone's going to have 2 cars. So that's why that national standard comes into. If you were to apply the APA's parking standards to this, it would require 153 parking spaces exactly, which is what is being requested. It's just the reason that our code does have the 2 per unit is the reason they need this. One of the reasons it went to planned district. So if there's any questions on that, I can kind of go on to talk about density a little bit. Okay, so for density, that was the second item that kind of pushed them into this planned district. So as you all know, in 2017, we amended our code to increase the density actually on multifamily developments. And it wasn't based on per unit, square footage per unit, it was based on the lot size in total. So you had to have 3,000 square foot of lot size for every unit that you wanted on a piece of property, which I think is, an appropriate code for a lot of multifamily developments. Obviously, it's worked for the apartments that are going on the west end of town. For the other ones we got requested, I think, on East 5th. We're really close to that density as well. But that often, the way that was written, honestly, it was intent and purpose was for when you had an existing lot that didn't have anything on it, to try and put an appropriate amount of units on it. This isn't unique in that the building is already there, and that the building takes up a whole city block, and then you're going to use the other portion of the city block for parking. There's really not a lot of room to increase your open space. You're surrounded by right-of-way on 4 sides there, so you can't add any open space to the lot itself. You're kind of landlocked there with the streets. And the fact that it is a historic building that we've encouraged the preservation and the conservation of. We wouldn't recommend tearing down any of the building to get to that density. And then I think the other option would be, well, you could decrease the units to get to the density and just do larger square footage of units. But that also wouldn't really, the staff sees it wouldn't be feasible because of the fact that you would be creating units that are so big that they wouldn't fit into our market. They would get too expensive, and then the project wouldn't be feasible. So in this case, because of the fact that the building is in existence, of the size that it is, and how much of the lot it takes up, there's really no open space in that lot for it to take in. We think that the request for the density of 85 units for the whole thing, which gets to be about 1,727 square feet per unit for the 85 units, we think that is an adequate request given the nature of the lot. All right. So moving forward, with other than those two, the development plan, other than those two items, development plan does meet, the intent of our code. It does have the 5% open space for parking. Once you have over 30 parking stalls in any parking lot, you do have to have some type of open space, landscaping, lighting, that kind of thing. They show that in their islands. They have stormwater retention to the south. A lot of this already is obviously impervious, but they are going to be adding some asphalt to this, to the rear, and so they are showing a stormwater retention basin. They'll have to provide calculations that whatever equipment, whatever infrastructure they put in meets it, but they have more than enough room there. Our engineering department has looked at that and realized that corner lot at the south where they're showing the detention will definitely have enough space to hold the detention. They just have to show what infrastructure they have. Apologize, there it is to the south there. Other than that, with our recommendation that I put in our staff report, I do want to mention a couple items why we are recommending approval of this development plan as submitted. We do have a couple of conditions, which I'll get you to at the end, but we wanted to acknowledge that the International Shoe Factory has been a targeted redevelopment for decades. I mean, like I said, this closed in 64 and has sat vacant ever since. It's been targeted as a redevelopment, has been listed by name as an area we'd like to redevelop. And so the first kind of item that it fits into is I attached to your staff report. There are a number of goals and objectives in our comprehensive plan that we believe that this project actually does mark off. And our land use goals, there's an objective to create life cycle housing and starter home and housing that is meant for people who are just getting out of college, just getting out of a trade school and needing to build some equity. That is marked in there directly. There's a goal in there about providing housing downtown, doing more historic preservation and saving buildings in our downtown. So there are a number of goals in our comp plan that we think this development as submitted checks off and we think fits into our comp plan nicely. The second is that our Historic Preservation Commission, it is a committee of the city that meets quarterly, has had this on their agenda at least for 3 years as an item that they wanted to address and make sure that they could try and bring attention to. Over the past 3 years, there's been over $60,000 in grant funds awarded to the Historic Preservation Commission and in turn to the city who applies for those, to have this area surveyed as a National Registered Historic District. The building itself has been found as contributing and qualifies for the National Register of Historic Places. And then we are still in the process of actually doing a district of the houses in the area to actually get the district itself listed on the National Register. And then lastly, there was a conservation study completed in 2007 that actually identified this as a redevelopment area, one that actually would be eligible for redevelopment assistance, that it was that important to the city at that time. That was in 2007, that identified this, that it needed to be a building to be saved and rehabbed. That wouldn't only find a good use for the building, but would also bring up the property values of the neighborhood and clean up the neighborhood by having this derelict, blighted building that's been sitting there for decades actually have some use and some upkeep and some activity. And so with all of that being said, with the fact that we have a comprehensive plan that it fits into, the fact that it's been a goal of our Historic Preservation Commission to save this building, and that we've identified this as a project, for, like I said, since 2007, as it's technically listed as RPA, Redevelopment Project Area Number 5. It's been listed on top of the fact that it is a project that we don't think causes detriment to the surrounding neighborhood. We think it actually has a benefit to the fact to clean it up. As you saw in those pictures, it is severely blighted. We are recommending approval of this. As submitted, we do have a couple recommendations or conditions of approval, one of which is that the parking stalls along Rand and Second must be painted to city on-street parking requirements so that we can maximize the most spots available. The second is that on-street parking stalls must not be reserved and remain public to on-street parking. We wanted to maintain that, yes, this is available for all the tenants, but just like as today, if any of the neighbors wanted to park across the street in front of the shoe factory, they would continue to be able to do so. Third is that a 6-foot site-proof fence be placed along the southern portion of this property line. So especially in this portion right here, where there are existing homes, there was a fence proposed. It didn't really have any detail of the fence. We are just recommending that that fence be 6 foot at least and site-proof. So this just keep a little bit of pollution from light and noise from that parking lot directly to those homes. And then lastly, which is the normal one, is that stormwater calculations must be submitted and approved to make sure that the new parking area won't cause any detriment in stormwater downstream, which does run kind of to this corner and then down south. And so that actually, as you go further down in that watershed, has had some issues in the past. And so our engineering department has already mentioned that will definitely be reviewed and made sure that there's no stormwater issues. I do want to mention that after you got your staff report, we didn't have time until the next traffic committee was last Friday on the 7th. So we did bring this to the traffic committee over at the police department, which does have members of council, emergency management, and the police department on it to review it, as well as engineering staff. Because of the fact that we were recommending on-street parking for this that is actually painted and designated. Typically, the only place we have painted striped stalls is in the commercial area of downtown, not in this area. And then we just wanted to get their input if they saw any glaring issues with having that kind of area with the increased traffic and everything that this would generate. There really were no comments. They reiterated that they also thought that Johnson Street should not be striped to even narrow that up even more than it already is, and that they were not in favor of putting any type of signage up to say that it was for tenant parking only or to do permit parking. That was also a discussion item if you wanted to do permit parking, but the traffic committee, their recommendation was, they didn't see any glaring issues with as proposed, but they would prefer not to have any parking permits or anything like that. So other than that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments by board?
Yes, I have one.
I always, go ahead, Tony.
Oh, sure. I mean,
I usually go first, so you go ahead.
no, you
Tony.
form, please.
Tony, go
No.
ahead.
So you mentioned the building's up for to become a national historic property or perhaps a district be built around that. Would that make it more difficult, or would it make it easier for a project like this to be completed?
The goal is always to make the goal for that is to make it easier for it to be completed. So the building itself, we know, is capable of being registered. We often will get grants to go and do a survey for a district and see if anything qualifies. And then if the district itself does, we'll apply for another grant to get it actually registered. And what that does is it opens anything, if say we are successful with that, and that's done through the National Park Service, they agree and they say this is a qualifying district, that opens up any property owner in there to federal tax credits, for rehab projects. And so hopefully that would entice anyone, whether it's someone just owning a home wants to rehab, or the whole idea with this.
But in that they'd have to jump through the hoops of qualifying for
They
those
would,
funds. But
and you have to do whatever they say. You have to make sure it doesn't, jeopardize the integrity of the historic structure. But it does, it creates a national registered district that you can have resources available for any type of rehab you want to do, to say you can have free resources with the state that will say here's material that you can do to make sure you're not jeopardizing any of the integrity, and then it does open up the tax credits as well. Like I said, the building, we know it does qualify, but that has to be individually registered, and that costs between $9,000 and $10,000. So we don't go and individually register buildings just because it can get very costly building by building. We only do it by district. So We have just completed the district in August. The way the program works is once you complete a survey of a district, you're not permitted to apply for it for a year. You have to sit on it for a year and make sure there's no major demolition. And then you can turn that back in. So we actually aren't even eligible to submit the district as a whole, which goes from Front Street to Fifth Street is everything that was surveyed in this area. And that is eligible in August to be submitted. But it wouldn't necessarily apply to this project for any local incentives or any state. It opens them up for federal.
Okay.
I know the building now is sprinkled, and I'm assuming the owner is intending to sprinkle it as residential
Yes.
opposed to commercial?
Yep. So we have had, the applicant has come to 2 of our site plan meetings, in-house with staff, with fire and water, to go over some of those internal items. They will be sprinkling it. They're currently studying where you have to have a separate fire line from your domestic line, kind of figuring out where those water and sewer lines are going to come in. So those conversations have all started, none of which will change the layout of the site plan, because there is pretty much utilities on all 4 sides, just finding the right sizes. I think Second Street has the largest water, that kind of thing. We're trying to figure out where they're going to tap from.
So do you know, is the city going to incur any cost for utility development? Because I know the water's not the best out in that area.
Not at this time. I mean, it hasn't been requested. But again, that would be something that would be discussed at a later date when it gets closer to construction, that we wouldn't necessarily tie to any zoning approval.
Okay.
We try not to, if we ever do any economic development incentives, we try not to tie them to any zoning approval. Just say, if you get your zoning approval, that's great, you go through. And if we need, any type of incentives or cost share programs, to get the project going, that's something that council can approve separately later.
And the only other comment was, under the application, it's listed as R4 multifamily.
Yeah, so that's the old name. So, yeah, R4 used to be our planned district, and I think, that's just was stuck. But yeah, now it's if approved, it would be coded online on our zoning map as PDR.
Okay, that's all I have.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Yep.
That was a very nice description. Thank you
Yeah.
of the project.
Any other questions, comments by board members? Carolyn?
I have a
Yep.
question. Do they need to come before the historic preservation, especially with demolition?
It's not, no. So it's not required. It is not in a design review area, and it's not registered yet. Given the fact that it has been on the agenda for 4 years, I do plan on bringing this exact report to them next week.
Good.
Just so
good,
everyone can
because
see
We're having a
it.
meeting, we're not meeting as often as we used to, so this would be timely
Yeah.
to bring this.
So this report,
Keep them in the loop.
yeah, I'll give this report. It's just, since it's not technically a registered district yet, we cannot require a design review.
That's fine.
I will say from the renderings, I think it meets all of our design
I don't
requirements.
think there'd be any problems.
But,
I think they'd be thrilled to see this,
Right.
so this is good.
Yeah, I'll share it as informational, but unfortunately, since we had to wait a full year in between, we can't require any design review or
Not a
any of
problem.
that.
That's
so.
good.
Any other questions, comments by board? If not, developer, would you like to come up? Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Ed Schmeltz. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Sal. Boy, it's kind of nice to have somebody do 99% of your presentation. I don't even know what to say. Thank you. That was really good. Well, I guess really, I guess I can get my notes out, but he took care of most of it. I guess I would like to talk about, I know it's probably not too crucial to the zoning aspect, but I would like to talk about the units a little bit, if you guys would like to hear it. These are going to be more of a high-end unit. You know, they're not Section 8, they're not low income or anything like that. A few of the features will have granite countertops. Most units will have between 11 and 14 foot tall ceilings, exposed spiral ductwork, for the HVAC systems. We're going to have approximately 2,500 square foot of lobby space on the main level, which will be set up, for interior from mailboxes for all the tenants. It will have seating areas, couches, recreation areas for the tenants with coffee stations, things like that. It will have some interior bike racks. I'm assuming we're going to have a lot of tenants that want to head down to the trail along the river. So we'll have interior and exterior bike racks. There will also be some storage units in the basement of the building for tenants to lease out separately. A lot of the exterior green space, we did try to, it was kind of a tough deal to put together, obviously, on the exterior because we were limited with our acreage, but we do like to have as much green space as possible. I'm a big fan of barbecue grills, picnic tables, some trees for people to go outside, a small dog park. We will allow pets on the first floor of these units only. We don't allow anything above the first floor. So that's why we tried maintaining some more of that green space towards the south to go along with the retention area, obviously. There will be security systems here. There will be cameras on all the exterior doors and in the parking lots. All the interior hallways will have security systems along with the common area. The entry doors will remain locked at all times, obviously, for security purposes. Every tenant will have a swipe card to get in, and then keypad entrances for their individual units. For guests, for grocery delivery, pizza delivery, there'll be a intercom system at the front and the rear entry doors, just two of the entry doors, where they'll be able to type in the tenant's name and address, and it'll call their cell phone, and then a picture of their face will pull up. It'll be a live feed where they can tell them who's there and whatnot. So just a few security measures here. So I don't think I have anything else, honestly. I'm open for questions.
Yep. Anybody have a question, comment?
What do you anticipate to receive in rent for a one-bedroom or two-bedroom?
Okay, we do have, 885 units, 50 of them are two-bedroom. Of those 50, 35 are two-bed, two-bath. The anticipated rents on those are $975, and that will include sewer, water, and trash. The two-bed, one-bath will be $925. A one-bedroom, $765. And we do have 2 studio apartments, like as Sal spoke to earlier, just 2 studios, which is, like he said, just basically doesn't have a bedroom. Those are $595. So the average per unit for the whole building is $878 per unit.
Good for you.
Ed, have you done this type of development before? I know you've done a lot of development, but have you done a redevelopment, what we're calling it?
I've rehabbed several old buildings, obviously nothing to this size, so,
Got Schrader's.
Right.
which we're still working on, so,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I know that. I just didn't know if you had done anything this size.
Nothing to this size. As far as new, I've done many new construction projects much larger than
Sure.
this, but nothing to this extent as far as rehabs,
Curious.
so.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Yes, Ed, will there be any elevators for any seniors that may want to rent?
Yes, so there is going to be one elevator. If you look at where the purple is there, to the right about, a little bit to the right about there.
Okay.
There's an elevator there. It'll go all the way from the basement all the way up to the 3rd floor, so it'll be 4 stories tall.
That is the tallest structure, correct? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Anyone else in the audience that would like to come up and questions, comments? Please introduce yourself and your address.
I think most of you know me, Kevin Understall. I own a little property on Robert Street there. Did a great job, Mr. Maniaci.
Oh, thank you.
No, I'm ready to move in. However, my main concern is you've done quite a bit of homework on your parking. Owning property along Robert Street and along Rand on the corner there, for instance, but I also own some down Robert Street. I can see where your parking system is well thought out, but if I'm living in that apartment in this new development and I come home and it's raining, I'm going to take the first parking place available, and I'm not going to walk a half a block to get in there. What kind of assurances do I have but my tenants come in to want to get to their apartments and all the parking places are full? It won't take long for these people to say, I'm out of here.
So I should mention that it did get brought up at the traffic committee meeting. that exact conversation of people wanting to park closest to their unit. That was part of a reason why we wanted to stripe and maximize the parking spaces, because you're right, at the end of the day, if you have a space open down here, but your unit's up here, you're going to park on the street because that's where it's close. So we wanted to capitalize on that by making sure we could fit as many spaces that are actually painted. Secondly, if someone wants to park across the street in front of the opposing, say, in front of one of these houses on Roberts or Rand, we currently have an ordinance in place that you cannot have your own vehicle in front of someone else's house after 10 p.m. And so
That's in place right now?
right now, and that was brought up at the traffic committee as some assurance that a tenant can't, especially maybe if they work downtown or work close, they can't park their car across the street in front of a neighbor's house and leave it there for days. They'll have, every night, and it can be, a traffic committee said it can be enforced by phone call, every night by 10 p.m., 100% of the vehicles should be either on this parking lot or surrounding the streets on the same side of the building.
That'd be great if you could enforce it, but if you,
Well, it'll
I
be
mean, are you gonna give me an ice pick so I can stab tires if you don't enforce it?
Well, I think it'll definitely be complaint driven, and that's something that, obviously there aren't a lot of tickets that are given out for that, but it just takes this is, I think, what Chief would say, a couple of tickets written is what gets education for that, and I'm sure it's something that the tenants can be made aware of, when they move in. But that was an item that was brought up at traffic committee that I'm sorry I didn't mention, so.
Well, let's keep it hot on the thing, because
Yep.
that's my main concern, and I wish everybody well. I'm part of development.
Very good.
I'm not here to lose either, so, okay.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Anyone else? You can come back up if you would. If you could, please come up to the mic because it's on. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on the west side, down Roberts Street.
Oh, the other side. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess really just to answer your question, I was thinking I thought you said East Roberts. So really the bulk of our doors are on those inside of those corridors. Really there's only one door on the west.
Red button right there.
I believe Robert Street, if I'm reading this right, Robert Street will be one of your, people are gonna come down High Street, turn on Robert Street and come into your development, is that correct?
Correct. So
Okay.
did I hear you, though, you were worried about people parking up here?
Right, and there and along Rand Street,
Okay.
the corner there.
Here?
On the
On
opposite
other
side.
of the street,
Oh, okay.
Right through there.
Well, so, I mean, we're only proposing striping the one side.
Okay.
I understand that means we can't totally prevent people from parking on the other side, but I'm hoping, we only have one door right here on the entire west side. So we're hoping that eliminates a lot of people from wanting to park over here, because our entry points are right here and also right here. So it's just as close for people to walk from here to here as it is here to here, is what we're hoping for. That if it's raining, they're still going to park in here because it's not any quicker from parking up here. It's our plan.
I guess that's what we do if it's not enforceable, so, let's hope so.
Yes, please come up, introduce yourself, your address.
Hi, I'm Karen Parham, and I live at off Johnson Street, kind of across from Elisha McLean's there. So first of all, I'm really glad to see something to be done with this building because it is an eyesore and all kinds of problems. So I'm glad to hear you tell us that it's going to be higher end. I mean, but we want it to be affordable for the young professionals coming in. I understand that. So my only concern is, and I don't think anybody can really address this, is around Rand Street. Not Rand on this side, but Rand from that towards the river. And it's just, we've got low-end renters. And I mean, the neighborhood's getting trashy. And this has nothing to do with you. So we'll have higher end. It'll have to be, I don't know what the rent runs like on Rand Street and on 2nd. I mean, the houses are just falling apart. You can drive down and see them. I wish someone else would come in and revive them. And then when Elisha McLean's has their events, I know, parking is limited for Elisha McLean, so just so you'll be aware that they will probably be coming. They do park on 2nd, all those streets right around there. But, so you have enough parking for the residents living that will be moving in, but what happens to the guests that come to visit the residents? Where will they be parking? that's going to,
Right.
would that be a problem? I mean, I know that you don't have to worry about that for your code, but I'm just thinking realistically, if I was living there and I had guests coming to visit, where will my guests be parking to come visit me?
So it's the same, yeah, it's the same thing as any other use. They're going
Okay.
to have to utilize on-street parking or the closest parking in the area. But the only thing I could really say is that the same rule will apply after 10 PM. They wouldn't be able to park in front of any.
Right, yeah,
anyone
yeah.
else's home,
So I'm not trying to bring in bad karma from, what I said earlier. I'm not here to fight that. I'm done with that battle. So I just, what's the like increased traffic flow going to be for our area? Is there going to be more noise? Because I have some neighbors that move in next door and they're really noisy, and you can hear some of the renters on Rand Street, some of those lower end renters, they're a problem with their motorcycles rearing, but I don't think this is the clientele that's going to be moving into this apartment complex.
Well, I mean, it will have obviously increased trip generation because it's
Right.
vacant right now. But at the end of the day, it is still a residential neighborhood, and all noise ordinances will have to be met. So some of this may have to be complaint driven if there are issues, but that's.
Okay.
we
So
have-
what are the noise ordinances in the city?
Well, it kind of depends on what it is.
Okay.
And it can be defined by nuisance. It can be if it's after a certain time period.
Is there like a certain time period where there should kind of be quiet? Like when you're camping at state parks, there's like a quiet time? I mean, is there?
Yeah, I believe so. I will tell you, it's not a zoning rule. It's a police department rule.
Okay.
So, but
It has nothing to do with this board.
Oh, yeah, I guess I'm
That's something I have
getting
on-
off traffic here. I'm sorry. So anyway.
So-
Well, I am relieved to hear that it'll be higher end, and it looks like like what you're going to do is high quality work inside the apartment. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you. My name's Tim Buttermeyer. I live at the corner of Roberts and Johnson. And I guess my problem is the parking besides too. If we're gonna stripe the streets the same as we do downtown, I don't know if you've noticed before, but I've been downtown several times. A vehicle does not fit in those striped areas very easily. My truck doesn't even fit in a striped area like that. So I don't think you're gonna get the volume that you're talking about in there because of the fact of that. And like she brought up with the visitors coming, that would be a little bit more, you're not talking about, in a block that size, if you would have regular houses there, you would only talk about maybe 20 units max. Now you're talking about 85 units, so that's a big amount of volume with people coming and everything else. I agree that, this is going to be great. I think Ed's going to do a great job, but I think there should be maybe another solution for the parking. I kind of do have a solution. I don't know if it's a good solution or not, because the worst part about it is it affects me somewhat. But if you look on Johnson Street there, at the corner of Roberts and Johnson and 2nd and Johnson's, there's 2 lots right there, basically, is what would have to be bought. And then you could make parking there and add extra parking right there, which would really help out as far as parking around that area. The bad part is neither one of them are for sale, and the other bad part is I live in one of them, so I don't know about that. But it would really help out that area as far as that. And as far as the building itself, I would love to see this done and everything else. But like I said, there's going to be a lot more volume of vehicles and everything else. But we know how that kind of works too, as far as like the Camp Street Bridge and et cetera, where people have talked about all the extra volume of vehicles. I mean, I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as what everybody dreams up it's going to be, but it's just a concern and everything else. But I think Ed is the perfect guy to go in there and try and work on it and everything else. I'm just trying to come up with some different solutions that could maybe help with as far as the parking wise and everything else. And maybe there's other solutions. But like I said, if you would go across, you got to buy other lots to make it. But if you go on the Johnson side, which is the taller side of the structure, because that's basically a 4-story building, not a 3-story building, because you're counting the lower level besides, there's going to be more people living on that side to begin with. And it's just like going to the YMCA or anything else to work out. When they go to work out, where do they park? Right up front. They don't park where they're going to go, they're going in to work out, but they're still going to park up front. And it's just like going to the grocery store or anywhere else. If they can find a better parking spot, it's going to happen. And as far as the complaint-driven situation, you know, as far as some of those laws, you might as well throw them out the books, because the bottom line is, it gets old to have to call constantly about different things all the time. You know, it's just one of those things, it's a nuisance to the police officers and everything else too, besides to have to follow up on all that constantly, you know what I'm saying? You don't want to be the bad guy in the neighborhood, always complaining about this and complaining about that, but I do see a problem with that part there as far as parking wise. And like you said, the striped areas, I just don't think are going to be big enough that it's going to be like downtown. And you can go downtown. I go downtown to Henry's to get my hair cut all the time, and at the barber shop and nobody's parked in the spots, because you can't park in the spot and pull out, get out of there with the vehicles that people drive nowadays. So if we all had the smart park, like you seen in the Super Bowl thing, where they just park themselves, you know, possibly, you know what I'm saying? But it's not one of those things that's, you know, possible. So that's my only main complaint, is the parking issue. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Anyone else that would like to speak? Yeah.
I'm Karen Day. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but here I am. So thank you for listening to me. I know a lot of you people up here. I live on the corner of Johnson and Edith. So right on the other side of the green space on the bottom, that's my house right there on the corner. And I, like the other people here, am concerned about the parking. And you threw out a lot of numbers here. I was trying to write them down so I remember, but I think what you said was you were planning on 1.8 cars per unit.
Correct.
Okay, well, see, I have a problem with that, because every couple nowadays is a two-car family. You know, so right there, you don't have enough parking space. So, and also the two-bedroom apartments, if there's a teenager there, then you got 3 cars. Okay, and then people visiting, there's going to be more cars. So I just don't think there's enough parking spaces for everybody. So I would suggest that you turn down this proposal as is and have them come back with not as many units. Make them bigger and make them more expensive, because we're trying to bring in young professionals and the quality people that are going to contribute to the community here. And the old shoe factory there is in a perfect spot, because you're right across from the park over there on the other side of High. You can walk downtown to, you know, take advantage of the restaurants and the shops. And there are the beautiful buildings that we have already done down on Front Street. Some of them are just gorgeous and high end. We need to keep that standard up. We don't need to be having smaller apartments at the cost of congestion and frustration of the people who are already living in town. And, you know, $975 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment is incredible deal. We could go up with that. You know, people that are moving out from West County and Clayton, you know, they don't mind paying $1,200 to live out here in this awesome town that we live in, you know?
On the other hand of that, I know I'm on various committees, and we are striving to attract people. If you're a teacher, if you're a fireman, if you're a policeman, you can't afford that. And I don't want those people to have to go to Union.
I agree.
Across the river to live. I think, and this new development on Locust, I think the city is trying to get affordable housing that not necessarily on low level, you know, what you were talking about. I mean, there's a lot of rental property that is pretty marginal. But at the same time, I'm excited about having something to offer people that is not they're not giving up a good standard of living, but it's something they can afford, because not all of us can afford what's down on Front Street.
No, we cannot afford what's down on Front Street.
$100,000 on something.
I agree.
So I appreciate your idea, and Washington is very unique and very special in Franklin County, but at the same time, I think there's room to open our arms to some
I agree.
affordable housing.
Yes, I agree.
I
But-
don't see, shooting for $1,200 or $1,400 and a larger unit. I think there's a place for this.
There is a place for that. There is, and there's also a place for moderate housing, because we have a lot of development going in along Highway 100.
Well, but at the same time, downtown living is wonderful. And-
Right,
and
exactly.
it should be available to more than just either the really low end that's living in places that are pretty grim, and the really
Yes.
high end that is something that some of us can't aspire to.
Well-
So, but I appreciate your thoughts.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think there's a counterpoint to that, too.
Well, I think location, location, location. And I think people will pay more for a better location. And the apartments that are going in on Highway 100 are going to be affordable apartments, if that's what people can afford. But if they want to live close to where the action is, they're going to pay more for that. And I'm a paramedic. I know what paramedics make. I know what firemen make. I know what police make. And a two-person income could afford that, if that's what they want to do, if that's what they choose, if that's where they want to live, they will make it work. And also, I just want to let you know that for the parking on Johnson Street, they're going to be parking on both sides of the street, and there's only one block on Johnson Street that has sidewalks. The other 2 blocks of Johnson Street, people are going to be up towards 3rd Street. People are going to be getting out of their cars onto people's lawns. Also on Edith Street, there's no sidewalks. So everybody's going to be parking on the lawn or getting out on the lawn. There's not even any curbing on Edith Street. Okay, other than that, I think everybody here is excited about this plan and is looking forward to having something nice here in town and in this community. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to talk? Please come on up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Karen Burns. I live on West 2nd Street, right in the middle of the block. So I've lived there for almost 45 years, so I've watched that building for that long. I just have a suggestion also in reference to the parking. Have we considered a second level of parking behind the 3-story section so that people can go in from the 2nd floor? And there's your extra parking. And maybe the spots that are already there, the ones that you're proposing, which look good, maybe they could be enlarged for, like Tim said, for the big trucks, because let's face it, everybody drives a big 4-wheel drive truck. Everybody's got an SUV.
I don't. I don't drive a little smart car either.
Smart, it's not a smart car. Or their second vehicle might be a truck. It was just a suggestion, just, come off the second.
So you're
second
talking
level.
like a garage?
Another level of parking.
I'm pretty sure, and I don't know for sure, and we can ask later of the developer, it's pretty expensive. It's real expensive.
That's why I don't
probably
have
will-
no idea what the cost would be.
It would
is
probably
just
shoot
a
the whole
suggestion
project.
To increase parking. And especially if you're going to live in that 3-floor section, be nicer if you could just, go up and not have to go up 3 floors and just go up 2. Okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak? Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Jolene Patterson. I own multiple properties in the area. I live directly across the street at 715 Rand, and I also own property, on 715 2nd Street, and I also own property on Rand Street. I'm thrilled with this project. I think it's a great idea to be renovating this. It's needed to be done for a long time. It definitely will improve our neighborhood. Obviously, everybody is nervous about the parking. But I think we need to be practical with the development as well, because in order to get a developer to work with a historical property, which is difficult to do, we want to try to encourage that. And I know that the second-story structures, I've worked on multiple commercial pieces before that have tried those, and they are very expensive, so I don't think that that's probably a practical idea. But if we are trying to bring in more policemen, more firemen, more teachers, more affordable housing, which I think is an excellent goal, then I think most of those would be families or at least a two-person structure. And so perhaps eliminating the studios or cutting down the number of one-unit sort of dwellings and just increasing the number of two-bedroom ones a little bit, just changing the ratio slightly would give us sort of fewer people in there. I think that a lot of the policemen and firemen would have children that would be living in the second bedroom and not necessarily having a third or fourth car. And I think that may be a solution that would encourage the kind of development that the neighborhood wants and still be practical for development so that the developer has economic sense for the development and that the community as a whole wins with getting the kinds of people in here that we want in reasonable housing, costs, and professionals that are, I think, what we're trying to bring into the area.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak? Yeah, Ed, do you have any idea, garages, if you'd come up, the cost?
I think the last time we looked at one downtown, it was like over $10,000 a parking stall.
Yeah.
Ouch.
That's a number I've heard.
And, I mean, it would be a little bit difficult. Just, Sal, do you mind if I use your?
Yeah.
Just don't train.
Right now, just the natural lay of the land, our shoot.
Wrong button.
Oh, there you go.
There we go, okay. So right now, actually, I'm gonna go back one more. Right now, right here is where you go into the basement. So that's gonna be our primary basement entrance to get to storage units, which you don't wanna take things through an elevator or down a set of steps to go to your storage unit. This is also gonna be where our indoor bike racks are. So we want that to be ground level, which is also, we really can't change that anyway because that is ground level with Johnson Street anyway. So we have to maintain that grade and elevation right through here. It's gonna be a little bit of a steeper slope coming up here, and then from this street up to this parking lot's gonna have some slope too. So there will be naturally a set of steps going from here up to this unit. We will have ADA parking and ADA entrances also, but we would have to raise this whole, to do a garage type parking. I mean, it could be $1 million. I mean, it would kind of blow the project. And I appreciate all the feedback from everybody here tonight. Obviously, I guess my main concern with losing units and increasing, taking some of the one bedrooms and turning them into two, the numbers just don't quite work out. You still have the same amount of bedrooms, so according to the American Planning Association, we really still need the same amount of parking spaces. I mean, if we go from two one-bedrooms to one two-bedroom, chances are it's going to be the same amount of parking required. So, and then, for two one-bedroom units is more rent than a one two-bedroom unit. So really the numbers just don't work out to eliminate units and make larger units. I'm really trying to avoid the three-bedroom units. We're not really suited for large families. We're looking for the young professionals with the younger families. Two parents and one child is about where we're going to be capped out at. I have put a lot of thought, energy, and money into designing this, and I really feel strong with what we've came up with as the best solution. So.
Yeah, Ed, you already have close to 40% of single bedrooms in the project, so you've evidently looked into it.
Yes.
Yeah. You've done some projects much bigger than this, you said. Do you have, is it common where if you have one bedroom most of those, what's the percentage of those do you know who have multiple cars? I mean, this assumption to meet the code, we're assuming that 20% of the one-bedrooms will have one car. So in this case, half of them.
Right, very, very few, and to be honest, it's probably more likely that a two-bedroom unit will only have one car versus a one-bedroom having two cars, if that makes sense. Just for comparison, 100 West apartments out there, we've got 2 spots per unit, and if you drive, and the first 2 buildings are totally full, if you drive by there in the evenings when everybody's home from work, a third of the parking lot's empty. I mean, there's a lot of people have, we have a lot of single parents that have 2 kids. A lot of single people just want a second bedroom, or 2 people. So I really feel strongly that we have enough parking.
And then you mentioned at the traffic committee, is there a certain percentage vacancy you kind of anticipate?
Well, industry standard is probably 10% vacancy, so you can take off, 8 units. I like to think we do a little bit better job than that, so we're probably more to 3% vacancy with our history. So there's going to be several units that are vacant at all times. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a good point.
And not everybody's home at the same time.
Right. And, one thing that got brought up in the traffic meeting was our spots are 10 foot wide. Most, I think the standard spots are 9 by 19.
So the city requires 9 by 19, and I should have mentioned that the plan does require, or you have 10 by 20.
10 by 20.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They are already a foot larger than what our code requires.
So we could squeeze in a few more spots if I wanted to shrink those down. I'm sure everybody goes to Lowe's and Walmart and everything, and that's fine if you go once a week and you want to park in that spot and creak your door open a few inches and slide out of there. But for living somewhere on a daily basis, not that 6 inches on each side is a heck of a lot more, but it does make a difference. We try to make those spots a little bit different. So we could have squeezed out another 8 or 9 spots in there. Once again, I just feel very strongly that the spots that we have proposed will be sufficient. I don't want a project that people are going to have to park 3 blocks away to come over there. That wouldn't benefit me at all either. So,
For your detention basin, I guess your engineers determined was that sufficient, or is it like overkill for the project?
they just threw that on there.
Okay.
That drawing on there right now, they just threw one on there just to show that that's where it's going to be. To be honest, there's not going to be a lot of retention required, we don't believe, because there is already a natural watershed there.
Right.
And all we're doing is knocking down those few buildings, which already has a watershed off of it. So we're taking the gravel and we're pouring concrete instead of that. So that's going to be a very minimal area.
Yeah.
But we're still going to put a pretty good sized basin in there.
Yeah.
And it'll probably be a wet basin, just a kind of a little water feature also.
My curiosity about that is because on the preliminary development plan where you show the parking, one of your parking islands, and then of course the Johnson Street side parking, if they could go into that space a little bit, not even taking 10% of that total area off the top after you include easement, would provide about 16 to 20 spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that would already put you at
just to make sure I'm following, you're
Yes,
saying
sir.
maybe put like a row of them along this way?
Either that or increase the parking island. So if I guess maybe I'm using the wrong nomenclature, but where the stalls are in a line, bringing that down a little further. Yes, correct. And then the part on Johnson Street, I mean, that would give you the amount of spaces necessary if you could dedicate the space to parking.
And I'm not opposed to adding a few more spots in that green space. It eliminates some green space. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be something, to me, dollar for dollar, that doesn't make that much of a difference. I mean,
Right.
less I would have to maintain in
Sure.
the future.
And-
But like I said, I just do like the green space. But if adding 10 spots and that is a deal breaker, I'm more than willing to.
Yeah. Something else that I thought of that didn't come up, I guess, in the traffic committee is that if you want to add more parking to a street, and they seem to be narrow streets, I mean, it would be interesting to explore, and this would be a city-side argument that would have no bearing on this. But so if this never becomes a problem and it's approved, then of course no action needed. But should we have need for some kind of a traffic study, I mean, how difficult would it be to turn those into one-way streets, the side streets there, and add diagonal parking stalls to basically add 40% more parking onto the streets?
I mean, that would just be a recommendation from traffic committee, and then the council would have to approve anything to be approved by that. But yeah, I think a traffic study would have to be completed before we do anything that drastic.
Well, sure, and you would only know that, if it seemed to be a problem, right? So if people are calling and complaining and if it says, well, we have to fix this, I would see maybe as a logical mechanism saying, well, what if these are one-way streets and there's a ton of extra parking for everyone on the side of the building?
Johnson couldn't be made a one-way street and have diagonal parking because you're not maintaining your fire lane access around the building then. You don't have enough street width there to do that. Follow what I'm saying? Because right now the street's 28 foot, right, Sal? Johnson Street's
I'm sorry, it's
28.
it's less than 30, so
Yeah.
28, 29.
So you have to have 24 for a fire lane.
24 for a fire lane.
Right.
So it's already not sufficient for a
Already
fire
not
lane.
Sufficient, technically,
Okay, all right.
just as a
Hey, we're exploring.
My question, this doesn't really have anything, this is more for us.
thank you.
me, But, so if Johnson's a 28-foot street, I just kind of, pictures are worth 1,000 words, when you look at this aerial shot. It's probably taken in the wintertime, and you don't know what time of day it is, except you can look at the shadows and kind of see that it's probably mid-afternoon, something like that. You don't know what day of the week it is, but there's about 88 houses in that picture and about 45 to 50 cars. So just giving that snapshot, if you look around where the cars are parked, there's not a lot of cars parked on the streets. A lot of the houses have their own garages. So I really think that parking is really not going to be an issue. If we looked at this picture and you saw,
What picture are you referring to?
I'm looking at
Johnson?
that one right there.
Okay, yep.
I understand, and that's what I'm saying. You can't tell what time of day it is and things like that, and I understand that. It's going to be more at nighttime. But I really don't know that it's going to be enough. I think we're close enough to the numbers.
Yeah.
So it's been explained.
with a
I think
vacant
it'll be okay.
Right. And I think we are fortunate that a lot of, all 4 blocks surrounding have alleys with a lot of the houses do have garage. You're correct. I think I would say for us, the burden is not on them to make sure they have garages. It's a burden on the applicant to make sure they can provide the parking. And that's where our recommendation is coming from. My recommendation is that the assumptions and that the proposal that the applicant has given us, that with the 1.8 and having that percentage of 1 bedrooms, with 3% vacancy rate, with the on-street, with the closest to the door, and the fact that they're assuming 20% of those will have at least 1 car, even that's assuming that every single 2-bedroom is going to have 2 cars. Right. That's not even assuming that. We're assuming that 20% of the 1-bedrooms are going to have 1 car, and 100% of the 2-bedrooms are going to have 2 cars. So that's where my recommendation is that I think the parking is adequate. Just from my opinion, is that it's because of the fact that you're not going to have 100% of those units with 2 cars on the 2-bedroom. So that's where we're saying, okay, we think this is adequate, and then pair that with, we don't want to put the burden on the neighbors, but that we do have an ordinance that protects them after 10 p.m. at night, that hopefully if it became a problem, that can take a couple calls over a couple weeks, and tenants will start learning. It's all education. They start realizing that, and that's really where our recommendation came from more than anything else.
Any other questions, comments by board members? Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to wait until everybody finished their comments, but my name's L.B. Eckelkamp. I'm a partner in Eckelkamp Enterprises, which is the owner of this property. We've owned it for many, many years. It was purchased by my dad many years ago. Our family also owned the Deb Shoe Factory building near the hospital. And when we sold the Deb building to the developer to put in the apartments that were put there, we were really excited about getting that done and are still excited about what happened there and what a great addition that was to that area. Those buildings are just old and they need to be rehabbed and to be redeveloped. And we've been looking for years for someone who was come up with a plan that would work economically for the developer and be able to do what he's doing here. I think this is just an outstanding plan. It works out with the extra ground that is available. There is enough parking. You know, you can count all the cars you want, but look at all of the parking lots around. They're never full. The requirements that are made are very generous, and I think you'll find in the end that parking was something that people worried about, but never came true. The key thing that is going to happen is you're going to take buildings that are just basically an eyesore. They're an embarrassment to me. We've been looking for years for someone who would be able to come up with a plan where he can economically do the work and have the kind of housing that this city sadly needs. It's just, in my opinion, the perfect solution to a lot of problems, and I'm very proud to be able to stand here and say, hey, I'm for this. I really think this is a good thing. It's a good thing for the city, and I think it'll be a good thing for everybody around it, because it's now new. It's not new, but it's going to look new, and it's going to be a real asset to the neighborhood. So I encourage you to approve his plan. I think it's well thought out. It's one that meets the economics and one that he can get accomplished. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
You have
Thank you.
not had anyone else with a plan come forward and try to make it work?
We've not had any, I mean, we've had lots of people looking at it and trying to figure out how to do it. And I really thought that the person who did the Deb building would end up doing it, but he didn't want to do it. This building is about twice the size of the Deb building.
It's big.
As far as square footage is concerned. And so there's a lot of money is going to be spent by Ed Schmeltz to really make this a nice property. And I'm proud that we finally got the job done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up.
I'm back again. Kevin Understall. I agree with you 100%, LB. It's going to be a great development, and we need it on that in the town. The old part of town as it is. And the rest, this is a comment, it really isn't for any of you except for Sandy. I really think what this city needs to do, and it doesn't need to go to Mr. Smells to do this. Did I say that right? That being Robert Street coming off of High Street is going to be one of the main entrances in there. That the street really needs a lot of work. We need new curb and gutter, we need new sidewalks, there's a hell of a crown in it. And there's a 2-foot wide grass patch on each side. The street could be widened, possibly, and a good upgrade would be great. And that's
Well, a little redevelopment spurs on more redevelopment. You know, that's how that works. So
You know,
anyway,
the
this
streets
is-
are the lifeblood of any development. so,
Exactly.
You know, I just threw that out
Increased
there.
traffic causes more,
Excuse me?
increased traffic causes more redevelopment
Thank you.
on the infrastructure.
And again,
things
thank
like
you all.
that. So, very good. Thank you, Kevin.
Thankless job.
Thank you. No, we don't.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Any other
Kevin.
comments, questions by anyone in the audience?
Bob Engeman, 119 Johnson Street. Sal, if you could again, just point out where those entrances are for the locked entrances. For the buildings, access into the buildings.
Oh,
I
may at
missed
the
that
end, I
earlier.
think, if I'm right, I think he said one here, one on this side, one on the opposite side, and one over here.
Okay, so the.
Is that correct, Ed?
Yeah, well, you look at the color one again, it's,
Oh, where all the little steps are?
yeah.
So one there, one there, one there, one there, and there's two here.
So there'd be two entrances off of Second Street then?
Yeah, so I get, well, technically
Are there
three,
two
because they're gonna
drive-
count this wing where the single story is,
Okay,
here, and then one here.
okay, so coming in off of Second Street, you go into the parking lots or the entrance, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments? Any other questions or comments by board?
I am extremely excited to see these become high-end, nicer, functional apartments, I think, as so many people are. But, you know, weighing that with trying to find what's, you know, right for the place in the community, I tend to agree. This could be a great, great plan. So
Is that a motion?
I'll wait until you.
There's no further discussion. I'll have a motion.
Motion to approve with staff recommendations.
First and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here.
He knows when it goes to council.
Yeah, so it goes to council a week from tomorrow. So because of the holiday, it will be on Tuesday, the 18th at 7 p.m. in this room. So a week from the exact same thing.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. We try to get all the facts out we can here, and then we approve or disapprove, and then we send it to council, then council has the final say. Yep. Or maybe less. Thank you very much. Well, wait a second here. It is exciting stuff to see that, those photos up there.
I always thought that if I grew up big and strong, I'd do something with that building.
Yeah. I think more than big and strong.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean.
I hope they have good insulated glass.
You look at these. Wow.
We'll move on to item number 4, file number 200202, the sale of Lot 12 of Heidemann Industrial Park to Noah's Ark Amendment number 21 to the redevelopment plan.
All right. So we haven't done one of these since Melton back in, I guess, late 18 is when that we actually did this. But as you all probably remember, when we sell a lot in the Heidemann Industrial Park, that is technically a planned development. That entire industrial park is a redevelopment plan that 353 did back in 2001. So every single lot sale has to go through an amendment to the redevelopment plan. To have that sale approved, to basically just have it change ownership. We don't have an actual development plan like we just saw. There's no site plan, there's no parking requirements. It's just a formal procedural thing we have to do to be able to change hands. And so this first one on lot 12 is for 9.4 acres right here for the whole lot.
Right across from LMI?
Yes,
Yes.
yep. And at this time, it's scheduled to close at the end of March, the sale is. So we're not going to send this one to council next week because they have some more time, some more things to look at, and we don't want to get it approved before they're ready to sign. So we just wanted to make sure we didn't have to squeeze it on your March agenda, so. Mark, if the price changes, do we have to come back? No. It's actually just because changing ownership? Okay.
Any questions, comments, board?
This is good.
We're running out of lots.
Yeah.
Yep.
If there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak on it? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve this and pass it on to council.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Moving on to item number 5, file number 200203, the sale of lots 21, 22, and 23 of the Heidemann Industrial Park to Project Trace, Amendment 22 to the redevelopment plan.
All right, the exact same thing, just right across the street. This is what was advertised as lots 21, 22, and 23. They are actually, the company, Project Trace, will be purchasing all three. It's 16.4 acres. This one is something we're a little bit more excited about because this will go to council next week. They're ready to go. It's scheduled to close March 3rd at the latest. They can't make an announcement until we get their tax incentive or their state incentive. That is a requirement that if you make an announcement before the state gives you their incentive, you get DQ'd. And so that should be done. We turned it in Friday, and it takes 10 business days. So we're going to do this will be a press release that I bet the state will come in on, and it'll be a pretty big project. So very excited.
Questions, comments? Yes, please come up and introduce yourself. Thank you.
I'm Cynthia Seavey, and I did have a question. I was wondering, who's going to be the buyer of that property?
Of the Project Trace?
Yes.
Well,
Can I say?
well, I can because it's in the packet. So it doesn't disqualify them. It'll be WEG Transformers.
Wade Transformers?
WEG.
WEG Transformers. I didn't want that in the paper yet, but that's all right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
It is in the packet. We had to put the contract as an exhibit. So if you did some digging, it would have been there anyway, which I'm sure some of you did.
Yeah.
But we just didn't want the state does a press release search. We didn't want any articles coming up that scared them.
If there's no other questions, comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
So just a quick question, Sal, how many lots are left in that development?
Two that are owned by us. So right here is lot 15, it's 3.4 acres. Right here is lot 18, 3.8. There is a lot right here that has been broken off.
Okay.
It's about 4 acres as well, but we don't own that. It did just get listed this past summer, though.
Yeah.
So are you looking for more?
We are.
I figured you were.
Yep.
At the
So-
same time, we've kind of taken a philosophy, I'm on 353 also.
Okay.
That we'd try to get some private development.
Yes.
Also possible.
Yes.
So there's a lot of things in the
Trying
works.
to keep all our options open to not have to go out for like a $4 million loan.
Sure.
But at the same time, if I have projects kind of waiting on the sidelines, and if we don't have anywhere for them to build, they're going to go somewhere else.
That's exactly right. That's
So-
why I asked.
Yeah.
So we are working on it.
A lot of development from within the community, the people that are there already.
You know, we went to a Missouri Economic Development Council meeting, and every community, they say 80% of every community is from existing companies' growth. Only 20% of your stuff is attraction, so we're pretty normal in that regard. Lucky, but normal.
Yeah, and I think it's good,
Yeah.
yeah.
If we build it, they will come.
If we build it, hopefully they'll grow.
Well,
Yeah.
If we have a spot,
Yeah.
build it.
That's what I mean.
If we don't build it, they'll leave.
And if I could, I remember when we redid some of the parking requirements for commercial, like Walmart and some of those, we decreased the size of the lots.
We did.
Right.
They're only used for like maybe Christmas, and that was about it, so
Yeah.
we're paving.
Well, actually, when we decreased that we pulled those from those APA standards, because the national standard for retail has gone down because people you're creating
Shopping's-
stormwater issues more so than anything else.
Right,
So,
so, I just thought though, also the housing, it seems like, to me, a no-brainer with the parking, but I can
Well,
see where they're
single
concerned.
people living there.
Yeah.
right. Well, it's hard for him to get the data from the other ones, but that's what he can tell from his other units, that not 100% of those have two cars.
Right.
In town, like I was telling Carolyn, people don't realize or remember back in the day where people worked there, how many hundreds of people worked there?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But like Carolyn said, a lot of them lived around there and walked
That's
there.
why they built
But
built
there was
their
still a lot
houses.
of people
Yep.
coming there and working. Probably 2 shifts. I don't know. It's way before my time.
My mom worked
Even
there. She
my
was
mom worked
secretary.
That's right.
Any other business?
We definitely will have a March meeting. We already have 2 items, Phase 3 of Weber Estates, so we'll finally get Weber Estates connected to
Connected?
Rabbit Trail.
Connected?
That's
Wow.
shown on there. And then we should have a
We
pretty...
won't have to watch that motor grader anymore.
Yeah.
Go back and forth.
And then we should have a pretty decent-sized annexation for you. We're still waiting on a couple more signatures on that, so.
We haven't seen Cameron in quite some time.
No, we haven't.
Gonna have to prepare for that.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Oh, that is.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really exciting, everything going on in town. There's a lot of stuff, and it's neat to see.
Good stuff.
Anybody have any other business? Otherwise, we'll entertain one last motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Wonderful, you too.
Don't worry, Joe, I warned them that may happen.
I know.
It started to go south.